Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Wednesday, the 25th of September, comes to you from south of France. I'm actually down here for a few days. So here we look at the dollar index. A bit of a seesaw the last 24 hours, but it is still holding on to that positive territory. We're seeing the lagging line here on the daily chart really seesawing. So the dollar is actually just seesawing on the daily, and that's showing up as a broader wave on the 60-minute chart. Remember, this is my weekly, my daily, and my 60-minute, giving me my long-term, my medium-term, and my short-term view. So at a glance, I can see what's going on very quickly, and then of course I've got the point and figure targets as well. We do have two downside targets on the dollar, but they are counter trend. That trend still holding up on the point and figure chart. If we look at the euro, we're sitting at just below the 110 level, psychologically quite an important level for the euro, and again lots of downside targets. We're seeing here 108, 107.5, 108.32. So it does look like the euro will sink lower, and the sheer number of targets to the downside is quite bearish for the euro, especially this one that's activated here at 13% lower. So it does look like we'll see the dollar worth more than a euro on the long-term chart based on those chart targets. Looking at the yen, the dollar is actually up against the yen this morning, but not enough to turn the chart bullish. So the yen is still a safe haven for the moment, and that's what we normally see money flowing to the yen in times of uncertainty. Sterling is actually weaker against the dollar, falling quite significantly this morning, short-term bearish. So its run has come to a little bit of a halt here. We're seeing that on the daily charts just rolling over. So sterling now looking weaker there. And against the euro, we're down this morning as well. So sterling is starting to just weaken against that already weak euro. And against the Swiss franc, we're sitting at 122, hitting new lows this morning, just showing the Swiss franc strength, sterling weakness. So quite worrying there on the 60-minute chart. Bitcoin has fallen very dramatically in the last day or two, now down at $8,300. So we've had this question mark as to which way it would break. This is like a descending triangle here showing up on the weekly chart. So that has been a question mark. We're now clearly medium-term bearish. We're looking now to that 7,150 level, 14% lower. That's the it's a lone target, so it's not that reliable, but it is saying we will go lower for Bitcoin. So we are seeing quite a sell-off there. The S&P 500 index was down nearly 1% yesterday, just turning it short-term bearish, meaning that we're just struggling to break to new highs here that we saw back in the summer. We just can't break that high, and so we are seeing a retreat there. Downside targets forming, so the market's actually just lower. A lot of the attention turning to Trump and the potential impeachment, and that is starting to rattle US stocks a little bit. And we're seeing here the same on the NASDAQ. It's now in bearish territory on the short-term chart, and the Dow Jones down 0.5%, also entering bearish territory on the short-term chart. We've had quite a good run here. We see that showing up on the daily chart, and we're now rolling over. So we shouldn't be surprised to see the retreat continue. And if we look at the Russell 2000 index, the broader based index also turning bearish as well as we move through the short-term 60-minute chart. Taking a look at the futures, on the S&P future, we're down 0.2%, and the Nasdaq E-mini down nearly 1/3%. Does suggest that the US market will open lower today. Taking a look at the FTSE 100 index, we're down 0.6% in the UK, turning bearish here as well. And if we look at Midcaps in the UK, also turning bearish on that cloud chart. So we are just seeing these trends breaking and rolling over, so we are seeing a turn to bearish here. And the DAX in Germany down 0.7%, also just turning bearish on that short-term chart. And the CAC 40 down nearly 1% this morning, also breaking lower on the short-term chart. The Japanese index is slightly lower, held up better than Europe and the US indices, but the Hang Seng index down 1.2%, so we're seeing a very big move to bearish there. And the Chinese market was down 1% as well, so we are just seeing that market not quite yet bullish, but it is starting to turn in that territory. And the Sensex down 0.9%. So having jumped on the tax cut over the last week, we are seeing now the Sensex just starting to sell off, but it is actually still in bullish territory. The Aussie market down 0.6%, but holding on to its bullish trend as well. Now Brent crude is down 1.4%, sentiment weighing here, and we're seeing that spike on the Saudi attacks gradually being unwound over the last week, and we're just seeing every day we're just heading lower, and now at $62, clearly in bearish territory on the short-term chart and on the medium and on the long term. So despite the fears, crude oil is bearish on all three time frames. And if we look at WTI, that's also happening there as well. No great surprises there. US NatGas sitting at $2.50, so we're bearish on the short term there. The medium-term transition still holding to bullish. Gold sitting at 1531. It's down slightly this morning, but it has benefited from this uncertainty in markets, and we're just seeing gold edging higher all the time. 1550, of course, is the ceiling there for gold. We've got good upside targets on the long-term chart. Not much to read on the medium-term chart. We've got 1546, 1535 as targets, so potentially another 1% higher on the short-term chart. Looking at silver now, silver also looking bullish as you might expect, in line with gold. US 10-year yields, this is on the Treasury yields, we're seeing them sinking lower. 1.64%. So the sentiment weighing here, and we're seeing that the yield is continuing its fall back from the rise that we saw a couple of weeks ago. So we are just unwinding those rises now. And if we look at bond markets in the UK, European markets, German bonds actually rising higher, yields falling, bonds rising again, having found support. So we're seeing the bond market actually starting to look strong again. Looking at the individual stocks now, we start by looking at the Dow. This data coming from Yahoo Finance. We start with Boeing being the best performer at 1.23% overnight, but only a handful of stocks. We saw quite a few stocks falling here. The Dow Inc. were down. Goldman Sachs down 2.7%. The chart actually looking better on the medium term, and they have outperformed the Dow Jones Index still by 8% this year, but the long-term chart not looking great. We saw a lot of stocks here falling away, and some of these falls quite large. Looking at the NASDAQ now, we had, again, only a handful of stocks up. Intuitive Surgical, they were up 2.56%, still holding on to their long-term trend, but it does look like it's wavering. The short-term trend, though, recovering, so that looks like we are seeing an improvement there. That fall that we saw in April on the relative really hasn't actually recovered, so we are still relative terms not looking great. Looking at Tesla, they were the worst performer, down a massive 7% overnight, so really a big fall for them. And we're seeing that in the chart, that's starting to put them into bearish territory again on the medium-term chart. They've underperformed the Dow Jones by 30% this year, so Tesla really starting to look quite worrying there. Netflix down 4.3%. They were certainly looking lower as well, and we're seeing here a sea of bellwethers actually just falling as well. So Netflix clearly turning bearish on that long-term chart, underperforming now clearly on the Dow. Downside potential here of 20% on the target, so Netflix not looking good at all. In the Aussie market, we saw that the Aussie market actually holding up. Afterpay Touch Group up 13%. They've had an amazing run and still looking bullish, edging to new highs there, so looking very strong on the chart. And we're seeing they've outperformed the Dow Jones Index by some 200% this year, so really running away there. Still got 50% upside on the targets as well. Beach Energy Limited, they were down 5%, and so that chart actually falling away, although they have had an amazing run of late as well. So a lot of Australian stocks looking pretty good. Looking at the Nifty in India, Power Grid Corporation up 5%. They were the best performer overnight in India, and that's quite a significant move for them. We see here the chart from Yahoo Finance coming in and looking still bullish on the medium term. They have underperformed though, and then if we go to the short term, the downside stocks, Tata Motors, they were down 6.8%. They're continuing to head lower, so not a great situation there. Taking a look now at Europe, we come into the UK market. The top 100 stocks, Sainsburys are up this morning. They've come out with results. Sales not quite strong, but the stock is rising, so a little bit better than expected. They've been massively underperforming the Dow Jones Index this year, but we're seeing a return to bullish on that medium-term chart, so that is quite good. Not many stocks up this morning. It's a sea of red basically in the top 100. Tewi benefited a little bit from the Thomas Cook debacle, but we're actually seeing Tewi down this morning by 3.6%. So we have seen in recent days a real jump as they clearly lose some competition, but actually the market having a rethink on that. And again, a lot of stocks falling there. Looking at the 250 in the UK now, Metro Bank up 7%, but they were down 7% yesterday, so it's a real seesaw for them. We're seeing quite a lot of volatility in the price. And on the downside in the mid-caps, we've got Vivo Energy, they're down 4%. Cirrus Minerals woes continue, they're down 3.6%. The chart massively underperforming the Dow Jones Index. Taking a look now at the top 50 stocks in Europe, we've got InBev, their Asian floats got away very well, and we're seeing them rising on the medium-term chart, long-term still hitting some resistance. And on the downside, we've got Nokia down 3% there, so not looking as good on Nokia, and that chart still looking quite bearish. That medium-term hopes just fading. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.